Hey there, Bugwatchers. Welcome to Of Rats and Snakes. This is a Pathfinder game that I've been putting together for Twitch streaming with a few friends from both, what's it called? Shoot, I can't think of the word now. From Twitch and YouTube and a few of the names that you guys might recognize, as well as a few personal friends that I really wanted to play a game with and enjoy on stream and just basically have a good time. As such, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of an insight into the world that I've created and where the players are going to be. I wanted to give you guys an idea of what the scope of my campaign was, a little bit of the backstory that may not be immediately evident, so I don't have to waste time explaining to everyone in game what all is happening when the players have already heard it. This is for those who are interested in the backstory and just kind of seeing what occurs, seeing what brought the world about, and what the players already know about it. So we'll be using the Pathfinder system. My players will be starting at level 3. They are going to be very basic adventurers, just outside of that death range, which I so very much hate. What is it? I believe it's high fantasy is the 20-point buy system. We'll be taking the 20-point buy system. And you may recognize a lot of the gods and such that I'll introduce into the game, as I'll be using mostly Pathfinder gods and a few, I believe, from 4th edition. Specifically, the Raven Queen will play a big part in the story. And I'll have homebrewed some history for them, changed a little bit about them, made it fit my world as I like to see. The game itself will be focused a lot on story progression rather than, direct rules. And I'm not going to be too tight on that. I much prefer to explore and have my players moving along at a fair clip, doing something fun rather than get bogged down in all the rules. So if you're a rules person, please try to let that go and relax. We're going to be doing things a little bit differently, and hopefully you'll enjoy just seeing it with us here. Now, I think we will bring it right along to history of the world. Yes, I've decided, and it took me a while to figure this out. I am bad with names, but I have decided to name the world Laedra. World of Laedra, which sits, they say, atop the world of Laedra, said to be the material plane that sits atop the elemental chaos itself, a destructive and chaotic plane from which all the building blocks of the world are made. Down below, all the greatest elements form together in a sea of pure power. Rocks and water and air and fire combining and changing and swirling. What has floated to the top eventually created the world, they say. The material plane and these building blocks all lay at the very edge, which some say will be pulled back down one day to be torn back apart in a cycle of creating and destroying worlds that will never end. In fact, this entire notion is built upon what they call the Chaos Sea, which I have not shown on this map. I have only constructed one continent for now, as this is where my players will be. This is what they understand and will know. In time, I will show more of the map. But to the south, beyond even these islands and the broken islands that dot the ocean as you leave this charted territory, lies the Chaos Sea, a dangerous and tumultuous ocean where magical energies are so fierce that no ship has ever crossed it. They have water that turns to acid and drives great waves of burning destruction upon you, winds that will break masts and shatter ships, rocks that rise and fall from the ocean, and fire that falls from the sky as like rain. In fact, they say if you sail too far south, you will sail right off the world into the elemental chaos itself, never to be seen again. However, the known world is split into two major continents, the continent of Drom and the continent of Dimera. This would happen to be Dimera, as you can see down here in the bottom left. Dimera is actually a colony continent. Long ago, Drom, the continent from which the older races, elves, fae, dwarves, and the like, are from, long ago made a strange migration, not attempt to colonize across the Great Sea. These colony ships established themselves on Dimera, where they found humans who were mostly barbaric and violent creatures at the time. And with their arrival, they gifted them culture. They sailed around the continent, mapping it out, and eventually landed here and there, meeting the inhabitants. And these barbarians, some of them took quite well to these new people. They learned how to build, how to craft. Dwarves especially took well to humans, as they found their industrious natures were compatible. The elves were a little more secluded. They found the forests and the great snows and plains just enjoyable to explore and be a part of with nature that as best they could. And they settled themselves rather quietly away from the humans, who they found to be a little too crude and uncivilized to really bother with. During that time, they founded their initial capital, Ilmara. The elves actually still reside there to this day. During this time of exploration, the colonists of the dwarves and the elves also found another subgroup of humans known as the Death Tribes. These deadly barbarians just were led by warlords that worshipped what they call the Old God, a god of death and the dead. They were known for being incredibly brutal and vicious. They would fight anything and anyone that they could come into contact with. In fact, felt it was some way of life. And more terrifying still, they wielded the power of their god to raise their dead, to continue to fight even after they had fallen. This made them an incredibly destructive and interfering force with the colonization efforts. For a good long time, these colonies struggled and fell apart. And in fact, they lost contact with their original home. They were just too cut off and in too much danger and became marooned here with the humans that they had befriended. So these death tribes ravaged these places until about 1,000 years ago, when it is said that the old god fell mysteriously. No one knows the exact circumstances of what happened, but the god simply stopped answering the prayers of his disciples. The priests no longer gained spells. The dead went awry and ravaged their own tribes. And as if to mark this great event, the rot appeared. A blighted land is full of undead and monstrous creatures that are warped and seem to reject life. More terrifying still, it seems that some of these undead are even intelligent, becoming truly dangerous foes that would sap the life of any who dared enter their realm. However, with the fall of this old god, the barbarian tribes were incredibly weakened, and this gave the civilizations of Dimera a chance to rise and really grow. Without the powers of their old god, the barbarians found themselves much weaker and could not stand against the organized armies of the dwarves and humans that had banded together to create cities such as Balatar and Avos, some of the few surviving colonies. During this time, Balatar also found some new interesting power that rose as if to take the old god's place shortly after his death. A goddess they called the Raven Queen, who took up the mantle of death and fate. With their newfound patron, they marched southward and began to southward from Balatar and began to just eradicate or assimilate any tribes of the death tribes that they could find. During this time, they also built Queen's Perch, a city as a monument to the rise of their new god. It is said that this is the very place in which the Raven Queen ascended, the threads of fate having been wound into the world itself to show her mark upon it. Try as they might, however, even with the destruction of these tribes, the Raven Empire could never conquer the Rot, a place of seemingly unending energy and negative energy and undead. All efforts were merely temporary successes at best, or horrible failures at worst that resulted in many lost lives. Eventually, they gave up and simply became the wardens of the Rot. As the Empire rose, it decided that it would make sure the Rot did not spread any further. And they have held against the undead that reside there ever since. In fact, they maintain a horrible hatred of the undead, seeing it as an affront to their new goddess that brought their civilization to power, to which they owe everything. The church's theocracy has a tight hold and has declared that any practices of necromancy are a twisted affront to the natural cycle of death and fate, and that they must be destroyed. During this time, the city of Avos found itself free of the oppression of these wandering tribes. The march from Balatar gave it a chance to grow and establish itself and truly flourish. And such, the dominion of Baelor rose in the west, splitting the continent effectively right down the middle with these great mountains, the spine of Dimera. As these two nations finally began to develop and establish themselves, a third power rose, the Twin Steppes, a city of magical power and study. They say it was established long ago by a mage who wanted to be free of the tyranny and the theocracy of the Raven Empire, and wished to practice his experiments and do his work without the church looking over his shoulder. He established himself at the pass on that would later become the Twin Steppes, right among the mountains, upon a river and a great lake. This has created a very powerful position within the world, as the Twin Steppes are positioned to control the rivers and their trade, as well as be very naturally fortified. This, mixed with the careful political balancing done by its leadership between the governments of the Dominion and the Raven Empire, and the magical prowess of those who are drawn to this place, who wish to study and learn magics of the world, it has made it quite a formidable place to take, and in fact has never been conquered. To this day, it stands as a monument to the power of magic. Now, zoom forward a little while here. The Death Barbarians and the growth of these empires took a great deal of time. But about 300 years ago, a great event occurred, what both sides called the War of the Prince. The Raven Empire, with its incredible hatred of the undead, suddenly declared war upon the dominion of Baelor, passing through the Twin Steppes, which allowed them, as long as they were not dragged into this conflict, they were allowed to pass freely. And they marched upon the dominion of Baelor. The reason they claim was that the Prince of Avos and of the royal family had been practicing dark secrets, looking into the magics of the old god for immortality and death, creating horrible monstrosities and twisting souls in order to live forever and become what they claimed would be a lich. This was never proven, but it was enough to spark a very bloody and long war between the two empires. After a long campaign, it was the Raven Queen, who was, shall we say, what's the word? Victorious. Very simple word. But the Raven Empire was victorious, having marched upon Avos and finally reaching the city. They breached the walls and burned the royal palace to the ground with the with the royal family inside. While their claims were never proven, the Empire claims that this was a heroic effort to stop a very terrible monster from rising within the world. After this war, both sides were incredibly drained. The resources had been incredible and the loss of life phenomenal for both the participants. Very much a war of attrition and slow march. This meant that all of the land that the Empire had taken during this time within the Dominion was very difficult to hold, and there was rebellion and fighting. Due to this, eventually Baelor earned its freedom once again after a long resistance, and eventually pushing what military presence the Empire had weakly strained over this part of the world back across the mountains. Some say with a little bit of involvement from the Twin Steps, who wished to maintain the status quo so that they might not fall purely under the reign of the Church again. That brings us very close to the present. It has taken many generations to recover from this war, and an uneasy peace has resided over both sides. This tension has been felt, however, that neither has forgotten the War of the Prince. In the last 10 to 15 years, there have been plenty of what both sides claim are merely exercises or odd skirmishes or raids that have occurred on either side of the mountains, testing the strength of their enemy and keeping both, making sure that both know that this perhaps would not be the last war that Dimera would see, as both sides would very much like to unite the continent under their own banner. To the north, during all of this, we have also seen the presence of the orcs. Having grown up on this continent, or having been created upon this continent, the orcs are a hardy species that have inhabited the north and the mountains and the snowy regions of the far north. They often found themselves in conflict with the barbarians, even into antiquity, and as such have proven to be very tribal themselves and great warriors. Over time, with the rise of the empires and such, Haid Kosh also found itself being established, a kind of capital, in the very loose sense, amongst the warlords of the orc tribes. There is no true king to the orcs. They believe that such a concept is for those who are too weak to rule themselves, and in fact prefer to work on almost a tribal meritocracy, in which those with the most power are those who have most proven themselves amongst the tribes to be both grand leaders and able warriors of great feats. Their raids on the nations to the south have forced the creation of places such as Northgard and Thrill Cod, military outposts, which fall almost entirely under martial law and exist almost entirely to defend against the occasional raid of the north. Neither side has ever attempted to truly stamp out the orcs, as such a campaign would be incredibly brutal and difficult, resulting in a great loss of life and a great weakening of a great drain on the resources of the nation who attempted it. As such, both sides are content to simply draw the line in the north and avoid engaging anything beyond the problematic warlord or dangerous, particularly dangerous orc tribe that appears now and then and merely needs to be destroyed. And that, I think, will do it. I think the only other thing, the elves. The elves who inhabited the forest with the rise of civilizations found themselves pulling away from Dimera. They did not like the rise of cities and the destruction of the nature that had once inhabited the land, or once dominated the landscape. As such, they have pulled themselves back to Ilmara, city of the elves, and this small island to the west of Farport. There is trade between these elves and humans and the rest of Dimera, and in fact trade across the seas to the old continent once more, now that the Dominion and the Empire have found themselves stable and strong. They have reconnected with their old roots, having found themselves, however, very different and changed by the centuries apart. The centuries nearly millennia apart, actually. As such, they have found that they don't really fit in with their old cousins anymore, who now mistrust them, seeing them as odd and mixed with humans in ways that they do not believe is healthy. But still, trade does occur. And in fact, one day, perhaps our players will sail across the sea to the sister continent of Dimera and land upon Drom, the home of the true dwarves and the ancient elves. So, I think that does a pretty nice job of explaining where we're going to be playing, folks, and I'm really excited to get this underway. As I said, our heroes will be starting at level 3. They'll have various reasons for having been captured or taken from their homes and finding themselves in Farport, where they were unjustly sold into slavery at the arena for the rising joy of blood sport within the Dominion of Baelor. They will begin their adventure within the slave pits, having to step forth and free themselves and find a way to escape this horrible situation they've been placed within. So, for those of you who are curious, we will be playing these games on Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you like, you may join us. You can see us on Twitch. We have 2 players within the party who are familiar for those who have been on my channel before, and may be streaming the campaign. That would be Endless Fragments. I will include both of their links in the description, of course. It will be Endless Fragments, who will be playing the young Quilla, and Sappha Knight, who will be playing Kiriel, the strange wildling from the south. As you can see, we've actually played a little bit already, and I will be uploading this introduction afterwards so that people can get an idea of where they are and what all is happening here. So please, feel free to join us and watch and explore this adventure with us. It'll be quite exciting, and I'm very excited for the entire playthrough. It's just, I really want to see this story come together. One final note, I will also be creating a Google document, which I will post at the end of the first session's videos, in order to give everyone a chance to look in and see the conversations that my players may have in text between sessions as the characters speak to each other. And this is for people who really want to get into the characters themselves, want to know about what the relationships that are developing are, and how they're interacting with each other. I will make sure to include a Google document with a link to that at the end of the first session's videos, and I think that'll be quite enjoyable. So I hope you all feel free to join me on this nice little adventure. There will be betrayal and great heroes and terrible villains. I look forward to all of it. So I hope I see you guys whenever we begin the campaign.